Welcome to the College Admissions Process Podcast presented by Prep Expert. Prep Expert offers live online SAT and ACT courses with the best score guarantees, instructors, and curriculum. Go to prepexpert.com to guarantee your child's success. I'm also excited to share my book, Straight from the Admissions Office, a review of my biggest takeaways from the first few hundred podcast episodes. It's packed with direct insights from admissions professionals and practical tips to help students and their families navigate the college admissions process. You can find all of the information in the show notes. Welcome to The Cap, where we are here to speak with college reps and other professionals in the field of college admissions to help answer all your questions and guide you through every step of the process. So if you're serious about college admissions, you've come to the right place. Are you ready? Let's talk about it. And now, here's your host, Dr. John Durante. Welcome to The Cap, the College Admissions Process Podcast. I am your host, John Durante, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today Nick Hervatin, who's the Assistant Director of Minnesota Recruitment at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. Now, we had Nick back on episode 88, which was released back in January of 2023. Nick, thank you so much for coming back. How are you?
Hi, John. Yeah, thank you for having me back. I'm doing great. It's been a good cycle, and we're winding down a little bit now for the summer, so things are good.
Fantastic. And Nick, since our first episode, again, it was episode 88, released in January of 2023. What's new at the University of Minnesota?
Yeah, great question. There's been a lot of stuff that's continued to really grow here at the university. We keep seeing really great opportunities in terms of research and our academic programs. And we have been seeing some growth in our freshman admitting colleges in the past couple of years as well. So that's kind of an overall kind of change that we've been seeing. But some of the new things, we have a couple of new majors that have launched in the past couple of years, one of them being our Bachelor of Science in User Experience. So this is a new 4-year program that really looks at the intersection of, design and science, so students can combine their creativity with analytical thinking to create, different types of digital experiences. They get to dive into, qualitative and quantitative research, computer science, digital design, all that good stuff. So we're really excited to have that new program. And then we also just launched our Public Health Bachelor of Arts program. So this is a newer program that's actually run through the School of Public Health that allows students to get those opportunities working with, experts in the field who are doing that research and innovation. And then students are also able to approach that field with a lot of different community awareness through their courses and different electives where they can collaborate with faculty and staff. So that's an overview of some of the new academics. Then just another small thing, we're really excited that the state of Minnesota launched a new program called the North Star Promise program in fall of 2024. So that program essentially is a tuition and fee-free pathway for students to, access higher education. And it's a last dollar program, so it'll cover the remaining tuition after, students get scholarships, grants, all that good stuff. So just happy to see that implementation's allowed for more students to have access to getting here to the university within the state.
Well, definitely you're sharing that there's a lot of growth, a lot of new majors and programs. And talking about popular academic programs, Nick, what are the most popular academic programs at the University of Minnesota, and what sets them apart from other institutions?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's so many different programs, and I think we can really narrow it down into some themes, I would say. So to start, I think we're highly popular in terms of our business programs, particularly through the Carlson School of Management, which is our freshman admitting college for business. I think what sets us apart in that field is that we have the advantage of sitting in a really diverse economy here in the Twin Cities. It's considered to be the 7th most diverse economy in the country. We have about 16 Fortune 500 companies right here in Minneapolis and St. Paul, which is highest per capita by population. So there's a lot of really great opportunities for students to immerse themselves in that business world. A part of that is also that we require our business students to study abroad in order to graduate. So they get that exposure working at international markets as well, which I think is really unique. I would also say another overall theme would be our engineering programs within the College of Science and Engineering. It's really a collaborative environment. We have about 90% of faculty who hold a terminal degree in the field that they're teaching. So there's a lot of research and work between our students and faculty. We also do a really nice job of hosting career fairs for these students. We have the largest in the state for our science and engineering program. And then just lots of really cool facilities for, 3D printers, wind tunnels, water cutters, whatever it is a student might be looking at, they'll have some access to. And then the last main theme I would say would be like the biological and health sciences. Here at the university, we're actually one of only two public institutions in the country that has a college dedicated to the study of biology. So that allows for students to go a lot more in depth with programs, right? Things like neuroscience, microbiology, genetics. Those are all programs that students can really dive into, and then have that research component tied in as being a top tier research university. So lots of things. I mean, those are, I would say, some of our most currently popular and competitive programs, but there's a lot of strengths also in, things ranging from architecture to psychology, nursing to music therapy. So there's a really wide range of strong programs for sure.
Definitely a wide range of strong
Yeah.
programs, and I like how you put them into some major themes, including business, engineering, biological and health sciences, and as you put it, so much more. Now, Nick, how would you say that the University of Minnesota defines fit in terms of both academics but also social environment for your students?
Yeah, this is a really great question. I know in our office, we have our main philosophy really being the way that we can help students find out their best fit and whether or not, the University of Minnesota is a good fit for students. So we always kind of break it down into four pillars that students should be considering when they're thinking about fit. And those are going to be, academics, opportunities, location, and value. So, when it comes to academics, thinking about the programs that are available to students here at the university, we have over 150 different majors for students to choose from, as well as I've mentioned being an R1 university. So a really strong emphasis on those research opportunities and the variety of academic departments that allow for, curiosity and customization. So trying to think of academics as a big picture in terms of what students are going to be able to do where they find their best fit. Outside of that, I mentioned opportunities, right? Thinking about things in a couple of different senses. On one side, thinking of those career opportunities. So, what kind of professional opportunities or internships are you going to have access to? Again, because of our location in a really diverse economy here, there are tons of those internship and professional opportunities available. But then also thinking about those more extracurricular, in a sense, things, whether it's studying abroad, getting involved in different student groups, all of that kind of stuff, wanting to think about those opportunities as well. I also mentioned location, right? Thinking about how that location is going to impact your experience as a student. You obviously are choosing a college primarily for academic advancement, but I always tell students that college is also a time for them to explore their passions and interests outside of the classroom. And living in a metro area, for example, like the U of M, really does allow for students to explore outside of that direct campus community. I do always say there's no right or wrong preference. If you want to be in a smaller setting, that's great. If you want to be in a larger setting, that's also great. So just knowing which one of those feels more natural, I think, is a big thing to consider. And then the last thing, of course, value, right? I think we all know higher education is a really big investment, and you want to make sure that you're getting a good return on that. I always tell students rankings, they can be helpful, but they are subjective, and you really want to consider the outcomes of the schools that you're looking into, whether it's, what kind of alumni networks are you going to have access to after you graduate? What kind of reputation does a school have? Those are all important things, but ultimately it's going to come down to the unique experiences that you're going to be able to get out of that school and how you feel you can apply those, into your future and into your career.
Well, I appreciate how you spoke about your main philosophy being to help students find their best fit. And you further broke it down into your four pillars, which encompassed academics, opportunities, location, and of course, those values. Now, this is something important for students to consider whether or not they're attending or applying to the University of Minnesota or, frankly, any other school. Those pillars are extremely important. Again, the academics, the opportunities, location, and values. And it appears, Nick, that students at the University of Minnesota are extremely happy because your retention rate is an impressive 91%. That represents the percentage of your freshman class that actually returns after that first year. So, what do you believe, Nick, contributes most to that high level of student satisfaction and success in retaining your students?
Yeah, definitely. It's a number that we're definitely really proud of, and I think that there are a lot of things that contribute to it. On one side, I mean, there are tons of different academic support centers for students, whether it's writing support, peer and professional tutoring, like major guidance support offices. So there are a lot of things that students can utilize to help them navigate those difficult things that are just organically, I think, going to come up during your undergrad. And then there's also a lot of different supports too, whether it's through our disability resource center, different physical and mental health resource centers. So helping students balance access to academic success while also being able to take care of themselves. Besides the different types of services, there's also a lot of different ways that we as the admissions office are looking at students to help make sure that they do have those supports available to them. A really big component is reviewing students for academic success and ensuring that the students that we are admitting are prepared to succeed at the university, which ideally ensures that the majority of our students aren't going to need to worry about transferring out of to a different school, both academically and financially. We also try to advise students before they make a decision on looking at that overall financial picture of what a 4-year investment into the school would look like. And then last, I mean, this is more so, I guess, of a little personal bias, but I just think the U is a really great place to be, right? I'm an alum of the university. Initially grew up out of state, but decided to stick around here in the Twin Cities after I graduated. So I think it's just a nice blend of the academic culture that we have and also that surrounding location that really creates a pleasant atmosphere for students to call home for those 4 years.
Well, I appreciate how you talked about all of the different academic supports that you have, but you also when you review students, you're really reviewing them for their academic success, right? Because you want to ensure that any students that come to your campus, that they in fact can handle the work at the University of Minnesota. And I appreciate how you also talk about advising them in terms of the financial piece, which is obviously so important for so many students and their families out there. Now, you mentioned reviewing for academic success. So let's talk a little bit about the application review process. First off, Nick, can you share the different ways students may apply to the University of Minnesota? And of course, I'm talking about early decision, early action, regular decision, rolling, and whether or not there are any advantages to applying one way over the other in terms of not only being accepted, but for those merit based scholarships.
Yeah, definitely. So for us, there's a pretty general timeline. Our application always opens up early August, kind of leading into a student's senior year. And then we have 3 different deadlines. There are 2 early action dates. One of them is November 1st. The second is December 1st. And then we have that final regular decision deadline on January 1st. For us, though, none of these are early decision. They're all going to grant students that opportunity to have until May 1st to decide whether or not Minnesota is the right fit for them. With that said, none of the deadlines really hold any different weight when it comes to admission, scholarships, or admission to our honors program. The ultimate difference between those deadlines essentially is just when you, as the student, are going to hear back from the university by. So, for example, if a student applies by that November 1st deadline, they'll receive a decision no later than the end of January. Whereas if they wait until that December 1st deadline, that decision might not come until mid-February. And then that January 1st guarantees a decision by the end of March. With that said, we kind of do roll our decisions out pretty weekly, but it's not rolling in the sense that once spots are full, we stop. The only time we start reviewing on that space available basis is going to be applicants that are submitting after that January 1st deadline.
Understood. And can you share how you balance academic achievement with extracurricular activities, personal essays, and letters of recommendation in your overall review process?
Yeah, definitely. So we practice that holistic review, right? So we are looking at all of those different factors, academic, extracurricular factors. We know again that the best indicator of college success is a student's academic preparation. So because of that, I would say high school performance carries the most weight in our review process. What we'll do is we'll take a look at a student's academic record overall, not just those grades or the GPA. So again, talking about, the rigor of the courses a student is taking, what that GPA looks like. If they have a test score, they can submit the ACT or SAT. We are still test optional right now through fall of 2027. So for us, not submitting a test score truly is not disadvantageous at all. It's not going to hurt your application. But then again, we don't only look at academics while they are more strongly weighted. We are still looking at those contextual factors. Those can be, achievements that you've had throughout high school, different involvements you've had, whether it's clubs outside or inside of school. But at the same time, we also know that, not every student might have equal access to get involved in those things. Maybe they have extra responsibilities at home, taking care of a sibling or a family member. We would also consider that kind of stuff. So essentially anything that you as a student are doing outside of the classroom is definitely something we would encourage you to share. My overall, I guess, piece of advice to students is that I know that you always hear how important it is to get involved, and that is definitely true. But I also tell students to get involved in things that relate to your passions and that you really want to be involved in. Don't feel like you need to take all of the quote unquote right classes or get involved in the right clubs, because ultimately what's going to make you stand out the most is that you have these different experiences that relate to you as a person and how you're developing your worldview and what you want to do in the world.
Well, that's definitely great advice. And a topic that's come up a lot in the podcast episodes, Nick, is institutional priorities. So, Nick, can you share what are some of the University of Minnesota's key institutional priorities when reviewing applications? For example, are there any limits in terms of the percentage of out-of-state students that you're able to admit? And what is the total number of students in your incoming freshman class you are looking to admit? And of course, feel free to share anything else you wish related to those institutional priorities.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, as the public flagship school for the state of Minnesota, each class on average has about 65% Minnesota students in that freshman class. With that said, we don't have, quotas or metrics that play into the review process. So we're not limiting per se the amount of out-of-state students that we're going to admit or the amount of in-state students we admit. So overall, though, I would say, again, 65% are coming from Minnesota. Just over 16% are coming from our reciprocity states, so North Dakota and Wisconsin, and then about just 11% are out of state, and the remainder are our international students. So that kind of gives you a breakdown, I guess, on where geographically we're seeing those students coming from. But outside of that, I would say another big priority, again, not solely on academics, but we do kind of have our middle 50th percentile that can help guide GPAs, test scores, all that kind of stuff. So last year, for example, our average middle 50th percentile had an unweighted GPA of about like a 3.5 to a 3.9. So that can give an idea to students academically where we're seeing. But again, those numbers are not required for admission. Ultimately, though, the main priority for us is making sure we're admitting students into a college that is going to have access to the programs that they're interested in, right? So if we have a student who's applying to us for the School of Nursing, they really want to be a nurse, we might not be able to admit them to that School of Nursing, and we would still typically review a student for a second choice college, but we wouldn't want to admit a student who really wants to be a nurse into the College of Design, for example, right? So we're really trying to consider those fits for the students as well as a priority.
Well, that's great insight. And let's unpackage the overall application just a little bit. You mentioned the GPA, and we often hear that not all GPAs, right, are created equal. Nick, how does the University of Minnesota evaluate academic rigor, such as AP, IB, or even those honors courses, when reviewing a student's overall transcript?
Yeah, so, rigor is definitely a big factor that we look into when reviewing a student's academics. But with that in mind, we also are reviewing that within the context of the student's school. We know that not every school across the country is going to have equal access to, those AP or IB programs or things like dual enrollment or PSEO. So because of that, we're really always trying to look at the opportunities that the students have available to them and review them accordingly. With that, I would say that, GPAs are also not created equal in the sense that we know that one number might not really tell a full story. I know that we've seen students who maybe have a really rocky start their freshman year. They're trying to, get their balance transitioning into high school. And because they had that rough start, maybe it set that GPA at a lower foundational level. And then we see a really strong increase in their grade trend sophomore and junior year, but that GPA might still look lower. In that case, the GPA is probably actually going to be less important than that grade trend itself. So we always are trying to look at that really, big picture approach when it comes to a student's academics. I would say too, when students are considering taking these rigorous courses, I definitely always encourage you to go ahead and challenge yourselves, take those AP or IB courses. However, I'd also much rather see you maybe only take 1 or 2 AP courses and do really, really well in those than, trying to pile on a bunch of those courses only to struggle. So finding that balance is really important when it comes to evaluating how rigorous you want your courses to be.
Yeah, definitely finding that balance is so important, not only throughout high school, but when you're applying to college. And when you're applying, at that point in time, your activity sheet, your transcript, it's pretty much set. But one thing that you really have a little bit more time to work on, if you will, during the time of applying is actually those personal statements. So, Nick, what do you look for in the personal statement? And are there any common mistakes applicants make that they should avoid?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I will say, at the university, we don't require an essay or a personal statement to complete an application, but we still do see a lot of our students submit them. So with that said, I guess at least from our lens, I don't know if there's any mistakes per se, since it's not required and our essays are very open-ended, but I can definitely speak on what makes a really strong personal statement. And I think that that's about being very real, I guess, about your experiences and what drives you. I think when I read an essay, I find, the most powerful ones are those that highlight a student's passions and uniqueness. Essentially, I would say we're looking for, qualitative data about you as a student that we might not be able to glean from just the required parts of your application. So thinking about, who you are as a person, what you might be interested in doing on campus, like what you are wanting to benefit from your education or what you feel you've come to grow and learn throughout high school. One thing that really comes to mind for me actually is an essay that was written by a first generation student. They essentially wrote about their experiences throughout middle and high school and how, their view of education was shaped by their parents' inability to have access to higher education. So for them, sharing about how exciting education is to them, that while they were unsure what they wanted to study, their drive as a lifelong learner was what made them certain that they wanted to pursue this next step. And I think what really did that essay well was that the student was able to share some of that vulnerability of, highlighting that they didn't know exactly what they wanted to do. So I would tell students it's okay to not have everything figured out at the time. And what stands out the most, I think, is that you're able to be real about where you are in life. Admissions counselors, we're people too. We've been in your shoes. We know that at 17 years old, you don't have to know what you want to do. So I think being able to have some of that authenticity shine through in your essay is definitely something that can make you stand out when we're, reviewing dozens of essays in one day. So.
Yeah, no, we appreciate that. And you're talking about the authenticity and, of course, the vulnerability. And I really appreciate you sharing the example. So I know you touched upon it earlier. We're talking about standardized tests. And, of course, the University of Minnesota is, in fact, test optional. But, Nick, what advice do you have for families, for students and their families, when considering whether or not to submit those scores?
Yeah, it's a tough spot. And I know that what makes it tricky is, every school is probably slightly different in the way that they're looking at this. But for us here at Minnesota, at least we're truly neutral on how we view a test score. If a student provides it, great, we'll consider it along with their other academic components, but it's not one of our main deciding factors. I wouldn't say it holds any more weight than any other factor that we consider. As I mentioned earlier, for now, we're test optional through at least the fall of 2027. It's possible that will be extended. We're just waiting on a decision from the university on whether it'll be extended, and if so, how far into the future that might be. But while we are still in this test optional era, right, what that means for us is that you are more than welcome to submit that score again, but not doing so is okay. Last round of our admissions, we had about 52% of students who were admitted that applied without a test score. So just to kind of give some stats there to showcase that you're really not disadvantaging yourself. Same goes with scholarships. There's no disadvantage to not have a test score for those. Now, I would say if you have a great ACT or SAT, go ahead and submit it. It's not going to hurt you if if you have like a 34 on the ACT. I don't know why you wouldn't want to submit that, so go for it. But if you don't feel super confident, that's totally okay. I think that most students who are submitting their test scores either, again, have those really high scores, or maybe they feel that can help offset their GPA a little bit if they're not as confident with that side of their application.
Well, we appreciate the insight and the fact that you shared that approximately 52% of the admitted students were admitted without those test scores. So thank you for that. And I was just curious, sometimes schools are test optional, but for their more rigorous majors, for example, engineering, they may require it. So are there any majors or programs where you actually do require it, Nick?
We don't have any different majors or programs that require test scores. That does bring up a good point, though, is that, for engineering, it's not required, but we do have students that if they've taken, higher level calculus or physics classes, like those sorts of things can be beneficial. But outside of that, there's no different requirements for any of the different programs here on campus.
Right. So if you're applying to a more rigorous program such as engineering, demonstrating that you have the physics, the AP calculus is obviously going to help you, right? There's never any guarantee, students, but it certainly will help where you show that you did a lot of things to build ramps and bridges to whatever program you're applying to in college. So you talked about the 52% that were admitted without test scores. So in terms of more data, there's this thing called the common data set. Now, Nick, many families turn to data when making college decisions. Can you share any insights from the University of Minnesota's common data set that might help students understand your admissions trends a little better?
Yeah, definitely. So we've talked a little bit about this in terms of, we admit for success. So all of our admitted students definitely have a pretty high academic history and have that preparation for success in college. I'll give you, I think, John, the link. And if you want to put it in the show notes, students can definitely check that out. But we do have our academic profile available online that has some data for students and families to look at to kind of help them get a picture of where those admissions trends are. What I say is really important to know, especially for Minnesota, is that we don't have just a general admission that we do to the university overall, but we are admitting students directly to one of these 8 different colleges. And because those colleges all have different, spaces available and all that good stuff, it truly does differ in terms of those different competitiveness levels and the trends that we see. So that information can help break it down. But on average, I know we talked about earlier that middle 50th percentile being about a 3.5 to 3.9. And then there is some other data as well in terms of that holistic review.
Well, we appreciate that. And Nick, money obviously is a key factor for so many families. What types of scholarships and financial aid opportunities are available at the University of Minnesota? And how can students position themselves to maximize these resources?
Yeah, it's a really important point. I mean, as we mentioned earlier, higher education is a big investment. And if you can get some of these scholarships or aid to bring that cost down, it is definitely worthwhile. Even $2,000 a year might not sound like a lot, but it does add up. So here at the university, we automatically review students for all of our academic scholarships using the same application they submitted for admission. So, there's no separate application that a student needs to worry about for these. With that said, they are competitive. We do try our best to award as many students as we can, some kind of merit-based scholarship. But again, because of that competitiveness, we're always encouraging students to also look into those other financial aid options, whether it's through filling out the FAFSA, or for Minnesota residents listening to this, you also might have the Minnesota Dream Act. But combined with our merit-based awards and those financial need programs, we do always try to offer students the most comprehensive aid package to themselves to help bring that cost down. Now, in terms of maximizing, these resources, I would say, even though we don't prioritize scholarships based on deadline. If you do apply by one of those earlier deadlines, you then at least have the advantage of, being earlier in the process in terms of getting your admissions decision sooner, probably getting scholarship decisions sooner, and then having some time in the spring to work with your admissions counselor to see if there's any kinds of additions that might be able to be made. I think the most disadvantageous thing is that if you wait till those last deadlines, you might not get a scholarship package until late March, early April, and that really only leaves you with a little window to see how you might be able to fit the pieces together to make the cost work. So if you're doing that sooner, you'll have more time to kind of look at that overall financial picture and plan in the way that's going to be the best for you and your family.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate that. And I know you mentioned it earlier. If there are any links that you want to share regarding financial aid or anything else, just again, share them with me. And of course, we'll put them in the show notes for the students and the families. Now, Nick, as I knew, this was an amazing follow-up conversation. Before I get to the last question, I need to ask, are there any questions that I didn't ask you today or a topic that simply didn't come up that you'd like to leave with us now?
So a big thing I hear a lot with students is the worry about not knowing what to do if you don't know what you want to major in, and feeling like that not having that decision made is going to be a hurdle to choosing where you want to go for college. And it feels like it's just this domino effect where if you don't know that one thing, it kind of maybe prevents you from moving throughout the process. But I just want to share that being undecided is totally okay, right? It's not uncommon for students to not know what they want to major in when they're coming into college. For example, at least at the university here, we have about 70% of students that come in every year reporting that they're either undecided or still feeling tentative in what it is that they want to major in. Over 50% of our students will change their major at least once throughout their 4 years here on campus. So just know that at least at Minnesota, right, it is okay to not have that decision made by the time you're coming in. Our motto is come curious, and that truly is represented, I think, in the way that our programs are structured, as well as the different resources that we have. So take your time, enjoy those first few years, and just explore things. If you know what you want to do, that's awesome, but also still explore other things, right? Because you might find something else that you want to add into your academics, or you might change your mind. Who knows? So.
Well, definitely come curious. And I appreciate you sharing those data points. 70%, approximately 70% come in undecided, while over 50% actually change their major at some point. So stay curious, students, as Nick said. And Nick, unfortunately, this does lead us to the last question, which is, what are your top 3 pieces of advice you would provide students and their families going through the college admissions process?
Yeah, so the first one I would say is don't be afraid to reach out, and that's, I mean, to your admissions counselors or those other kinds of resources that can help you throughout this process. I promise you that no question is a bad question. Admissions counselors are here to help you out. Like, this is our job, so don't hesitate to connect with us. I would say another thing to specifically for students, as much as you can, try to keep your eyes on your own lane, so to speak, and that you shouldn't be comparing yourself to your peers when it comes to your college list or the timeline that you're working on. Just know that it truly is going to look different for every student. They're all going to have different best fits, different priorities, and you don't have to feel you need to fit into a mold because your peers or maybe even your parents are expecting something of you. And then lastly, I would say, as much as you can, be an informed consumer, right? Consider the sources of the information that you're getting to and that are contributing to your thoughts about a school. That can be similar to the last thing I said, right? Like, try not to just take rumors or like, I heard Sally's kid had a bad experience at that school. I mean, that might be valid, but look into those things. And also, again, I can't stress this enough, but don't get caught up in like just those rankings of schools. Rankings are helpful, but they're not the end all be all to what makes a good school. So don't feel like you can't go to a school just because it doesn't rank in the top 50 or something like that. If it feels like a good fit for you, then it probably is a good fit for you.
Such great pieces of advice, Nick. This has been a tremendous conversation. I'm really
Thank
happy as
you.
I know it's going to help so many students and their families as they navigate through the college admissions process. Thank you so much for being back for the follow-up. I look forward to having you again in the future, Nick. You are
Yeah,
awesome.
thank you, John. Have a good one.
My pleasure. And to everyone out there, take care all and best wishes. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The CAP, the College Admissions Process Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please don't forget to tell a friend and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am your host, John Durante, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The CAP. Thank you for listening to the College Admissions Process Podcast presented by Prep Expert. Prep Expert offers live online SAT and ACT courses with the best score guarantees, instructors, and curriculum. Go to prepexpert.com to guarantee your child's success.